Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of What's Your Story? Tonight, I have the privilege of sitting down with founder and CEO of Share Our Strength, No Kid Hungry, Billy Shore. You might think that this is a repeat of something, but if you really look close, we switched seats this time around, so I get to ask the questions. So, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Mary Lou. It's good to be with you.
So we usually start by asking our guests where you grew up, school, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I know you and I had talked a little bit about this before, but
Yeah, we did a little bit.
we're going to recap.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we were talking about it because that's where Andrew Carnegie was, based, and the whole library, Carnegie Library system, was begun, and we had a fabulous Carnegie Library there. But I grew up in a little neighborhood. I was born in 1955, and I often think about how it was just 10 years after World War II. And so when we think about 9/11 today, it's already been 20 years.
Right.
But at that point, it had just been 10. And everybody on our street, like my dad and all the other dads, had been in the war. And they were all just happy to sit on the porch, listen to a ball game on the transistor radio, smoke a cigarette, which everybody did in those days. And it was just like a very, quiet, kind of like an all-American, Norman Rockwell life.
Favorite baseball team?
Well, the Pittsburgh Pirates. So I grew up in the era of Roberto Clemente and Bill Mazeroski and Willie Stargell, some real greats.
Have we gotten you to convert to being a Red Sox
Not at all.
fan?
Not at all. But the Pirates are no threat to the Red Sox. It'll be a miracle if Pittsburgh still has a baseball team in 10 years the way they're playing.
So how did you, the idea of, you got out of school, what did you do after you graduated from high school?
Yeah, so after I graduated from high school, I started college in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. And then literally the day after I finished college, I drove down to Washington, D.C. and started interning on Capitol Hill, and I worked in the Senate. I did everything that you could possibly do. I couldn't even get hired on as an intern, but I kept showing up every day for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Good
And
for
I
you.
finally got brought on to open the mail. So in the late 1970s, when I started on the Hill, the mail came 5 times a day. There was no internet. There was no email. So big, huge bags of mail came to the congressional offices 5 times every day. And it was somebody's job just to open them up, not to take the letters out,
Right.
not to read them,
Just open.
not just open them. So I had that glorious task for quite a number of weeks until I got promoted to taking the letters out
Whoa.
and sorting them. But
Yeah.
eventually I became the chief of staff in Senator Bob Kerry's office. Before that, Gary Hart's office. Bob Kerry from Nebraska, Gary Hart from Colorado.
What was that like? Was that a lot of just moving pieces every day, or
It was fabulous.
sort of like what you do now, I bet?
Yeah, it was a great learning curve, though. Whatever the issue of the time was, if it happened to be, Russia about to invade Ukraine, that's what you'd be working on that week. And if it was climate change, you'd be working on that. So it was a fabulous learning curve. I recommend it to anybody, whether you work whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent. You just learn a lot, and you learn how to do a lot of things. You learn how to make a case, to give a speech, to do fundraising, a little bit of everything involved in it.
I know when I was in school, there were kids that were interested in political science. They would go up to the state and do like page program for a day or something like that. I don't even know if they still do that, but boy, I hope they do, because I think that we need interested people, need interested children to carry on and figure this stuff out for us.
Yeah, and internships, certainly in the Capitol in Washington, are still a very big thing. That's where a lot of young people get started.
That's
For me,
great.
it was fabulous.
Is that something that you would have Nate, your son?
Yeah, I think he might be interested in that at some point. Although, it'd be very hard to pry him out of Maine. If we could do it, at the State House here, it'd be a possibility, or maybe work for one of the members of Congress in their, in their district office. He's talked about that a little bit. I think he would like Washington for a little while, but I don't even know if we could get him out of Maine for a day.
Speaking of Maine, how did you end up in Maine?
Well, that was my wife's great idea. Rosemary started coming here well before we met. She'd actually used to go to Cape Cod, and then her mom died, unfortunately young, and it was hard for her to go back to Cape Cod. So she found the tides in on Goose Rocks Beach, and then she started to rent at Goose Rocks. And when I met her and realized that she was renting at Goose Rocks, I thought that was a pretty good combination.
Yeah.
So
beautiful there.
Yeah, and so we've been I don't know, almost 25 years now.
Where did you meet, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so, well, it's quite a scandalous story. We probably can't tell all of it. I'm looking over at Rosemary, but she was dating what she says was a real scoundrel at the time. And but he was a guy who actually loved books, you'll be glad to know. And he and I had like a little two-person book club. I didn't know him very well, but we used to share books with each other all the time. And he asked me as a favor, because of my work at Share Our Strength and with the No Kid Hungry campaign, would I meet with the woman he was dating, who he talked up as like really amazing. And he was right.
She is really amazing.
He was right. So I got very interested in meeting her because she was trying to get her company more involved in community affairs. And Rosemary's schedule and my schedule were such that from the time we started planning to get together till the time we got together, an entire year went by.
Wow.
It was that complicated. And she was going to be coming to Washington, D.C. And so it finally happened.
Some people would call that playing hard to get.
Yeah, oh no, the hard to get part came after that. After I met her, she played really hard to get. And because then I had to like do everything from send flowers to her secretary, literally, to put my calls through, because my calls were not getting through, and just, a whole variety of things. But yeah, that's how we, that's how, and by the time that year went by, she was no longer dating the scoundrel. So, and he made, the bar was low, so I kind of looked good in comparison.
And you have the most fantastic son, Nate.
Yeah, he's the best.
That is a child that I've known for many, many years now. He has grown up to be, I just think, one of the most amazing individuals. And, I think for the two of you here, being in Maine as much as you are, and being part of the community, you're both volunteering on the fire department.
Yeah, volunteer firefighters.
Is there anything else that you do that's similar to that here?
We're both involved. I'm involved with the Kennebunkport Climate Initiative, now called the Climate Initiative.
Yep.
And Nate just does some volunteer work at the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust. The credit for him goes to Rosemary too, though. She's really I give all the credit to her. She's he's really turned out well.
I was listening to, watching, I guess, one of your TED Talks, and you started out with this conversation about I don't know if it was that one.
It was about Nate talking me into being a firefighter? Or?
Could be. So he talked you into it.
Yeah, he had this notion that I should be a firefighter
way before
it ever crossed my mind. And I don't know if our producer Mike Kelly knows this, but Mike lives on our street, and Nate used to watch Mike come and go and was obsessed with everything Mike was doing, and was like, Dad, why can't you be like Mike Kelly? Why don't you get involved like Mike Kelly? It was like a constant thing. We hadn't even met Mike. I think I finally introduced myself to him at Bradbury's or something like that.
Which is where people meet up.
Yeah. And I didn't really think that I would, honestly, I didn't think I was well suited to be a firefighter, or that my time and my work and it would be conducive. But Nate's pitch to me was that when we finally said, okay, I'll go talk to the chief and think about it. He said, Dad, did it ever occur to you that if you were a firefighter, you'd actually be saving lives instead of typing on your laptop and telling yourself that you're saving lives? So that was kind of an ouch moment, and the wisdom. He was like 10 or 11 at the time. And so I was like, okay, buddy,
I think he's given the two of you a few of those ouch moments.
Oh, yeah. No, he's wise beyond his years.
Yeah, wow. That's good parenting, though.
Yeah.
So I'm going to back up a little bit to switching from working for the senators to how you got to Share Our Strength.
Yeah. So Mary Lou, if you can remember back to, and this is like ancient history, you might be too young. If
I
you
doubt
can remember
it.
back to the Ethiopian famine in 1984 and Bob Geldof and Live Aid, We Are the World, all of
Right.
those things. This was this hugely catastrophic humanitarian event at the time. And again, this was pre-internet the way we know it today, pre-email. So we got our news from the news, the evening news, and this was such a shocking thing to me. And I'd been involved with Senator Hart for a number of years and been involved in one of his presidential campaigns. But when I saw so many people dying in Ethiopia and saw all these great things that were happening with these celebrities, it just occurred to me that they were fantastic, but they were all going to probably be gone in a couple years. That's the nature of when something gets a lot of visibility. And so I started to think with my sister, my younger sister, Debbie Shore, is there something we could do that would create a longer lasting response to this type of hunger in the world and in the United States? And so we had this idea to create Share Our Strength. We really started it honestly from nothing with $2,000 cash advance on a credit card.
Gosh.
And we cranked out a lot of letters. We had this idea that chefs and restaurateurs, since they make their livelihoods from feeding people, would feel connected to the issue of hunger. And we just chipped away at it. And it's pretty crazy. I mean, 35 years is a long time, but we've raised over $1 billion now, about $1.2 billion, and funded thousands of schools in the U.S. and community organizations, including quite a few here in Maine, so that kids can get the school meals that they're eligible for.
So as far as you have an office in Boston.
We have an office for our nutrition education program in Boston.
Okay.
Our headquarters is in D.C.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple hundred staff, maybe 150 of them in D.C. and another 100 around the country.
So are you? So as far as like connecting with some of the food pantries, those kinds of things, is that also part of?
Yeah. So we fund. Our biggest focus. There's kind of two big pieces of it. Our biggest focus is ensuring that kids who are eligible because of their family's income for school meals actually get them.
Right.
And we're all familiar with the school lunch program and the school breakfast program. Not everybody realizes that genesis for that was actually admirals and generals coming back from World War II saying our troops by the end of the war were not healthy enough, they were not fit enough, they had nutritional deficiencies. We need to start feeding kids at school so we have a stronger national security. That's where it actually all began.
Wow.
And then we realized that 50 some years later now almost 70 years later, a lot of kids who are eligible just aren't getting the meals because either the schools haven't had the equipment or the staffing or the resources.
Right.
And so that was a big focus of, since the meals themselves are paid for by the federal government, if a school needs $5,000 worth of cafeteria equipment, that will literally leverage hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of school meals. So we pay for all of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of families who, whether their kids are getting school meals or not, have there are times where they'll kind of fall between the cracks in terms of their ability to support themselves, and so we fund a lot of organizations like the Good Shepherd Food Bank and Preble Street, and certainly the in Boston, the Greater Boston Food Bank.
Right.
We fund hundreds of those around the country.
I remember when at the beginning of the pandemic, I think it really shone. It was a moment where the light really focused on what do we do. And it was a lot about education and kids going to school, but it was also a lot about the fact that when they go to school, they have a meal.
Yeah.
And how do we figure that out? So
because all the schools closed.
Because all of the schools closed. So did you participate in trying to figure out ways to get food out to those kids that were home?
We were a pretty big part of that, and I would say for in the last 18 months, I know we've distributed about $100 million to 2,000 school districts and community organizations. And first, we had to go to Congress and change the law because the law said that the school meals only got reimbursed and paid for by the federal government if they were provided to kids in school. And so, as you just said, with the schools closed, we had to get permission to feed them in other places, whether it was their homes or community centers, libraries, YMCAs, Big Brothers and Big Sisters.
Yeah.
So we got Congress to change a number of laws, and then all of these places need different types of equipment, personal protective gear, and so forth. So we had to basically, in effect, retrofit the school feeding program so that it had what it needed to feed kids in the alternative ways that the pandemic required. And so, we've almost come out of that now. Most schools are open, and kids are getting their meals in school again. But it was and people were very generous because, as you pointed out, for many people, it was the first time they understood how severe hunger in America could be. And on our newscasts and online, we saw pictures of hundreds of cars at food banks waiting in line for food. And all of a sudden, people realized, this is a big problem. And so we were fortunate to get a lot of generous donations, and that enabled us to distribute the $100 million.
That's so wonderful. Thank you for never giving up on this, because I'm sure there's probably days where you want to smack your head against the wall and, you know.
We're mostly stubborn. That's our main quality. Good. Not necessarily smart, but stubborn. We've just stuck with it for a long time.
And you have found some really interesting, innovative ways and programs. And do you have an idea bank of people that are just like constantly shooting you ideas on new things to try? Or
I think that's a really good question. We do. We work with a lot of creative people. The idea when we first started Share Our Strength, just like the name suggests, if you stop and really think about it, is that everybody has a strength to share. Everybody has something to give. You don't have to be wealthy. You don't have to be famous. Whatever it is you do, that could be a benefit to somebody else. And so we had this idea that, as I mentioned, we started working with chefs and restaurateurs, that you could do nonprofit work and philanthropy in a kind of a different way, that you could actually do it to not just redistribute wealth. So I ask you for $10 and give it to somebody else, but can you create wealth? Can you actually generate revenue? And we started working with all kinds of creative companies. Williams-Sonoma is a good example, where they have different celebrities do the artwork on spatulas, and then they sell those spatulas in the store, and they raise literally $1 million for us a year by doing that. Wow. They do a golf tournament. We work with great people like John Grisham, who we had here at the library, in terms of a creative person who, talk about ideas, right? That's his business, is to come up with ideas and put them down on paper. But he and his wife, Renee, share them with us. We have a lot of folks who are suggesting different ways that you can, in effect, be a nonprofit, but still make money. You just use all of that money for nonprofit purposes.
That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, it's different, and it means we don't compete with brother and sister organizations for charitable dollars as much. There's no strings attached to them, and as somebody who has to raise money, that often there's strings attached to the dollars that you bring in. Right.
So if you make a call to someone, I'd like to sit down and say it's a celebrity or an author. How does that conversation usually go? Can you?
Yeah, well, usually it's. I think you can't. At least I wouldn't be very good at making people feel guilty and donating, or kind of twisting their arm. I think you have to try to inspire people.
Right.
In our case, that this is a solvable problem. When most people think about it, they realize that hunger in America really doesn't make any sense. We don't have a shortage of food in this country. We all enjoy it in abundance.
Right.
We don't have a shortage of food programs. We were talking about school breakfast and summer meals, the SNAP food stamp program. So it really is a solvable problem. We have the resources. And I think in a day and time where it seems like so many of our problems don't get solved, they get stuck, and there's political polarization and paralysis. I think when people realize that actually you could solve this, you could take this off the table, I think they get very excited about it, and I will sit there and talk to them long enough till they say, well, how can I help? And then I was like, well, here are some different ways. Or let's brainstorm together about how you can help. It's not always about writing a check.
So speaking of how can we help? How can we help your organization?
Well, I think this is
our little corner of the world here.
Yeah.
What can we do for you?
I think, just even this conversation is going to be helpful to us, because we're talking about awareness. I think that's 90% of the battle.
Yeah.
Most Americans are, I think, really well-intentioned and have good hearts and good spirits, and they want to help bring about change in their community. So knowing that there's an issue, and as you know, we have hunger in Maine. We have hunger in the Kennebunks. We have low-income families that struggle. So that problem is close at hand. And I think people can, the thing I love about the issue of hunger is there's something that everybody can do. There's lots of ways to contribute. You can volunteer your time at a food bank or at a soup kitchen. You could serve meals or help clean up or help supply. You can write a check. You can donate money. And even a few dollars can lead to a lot of meals. You can be an advocate, and you can write to your senators and your governor and your congresspeople saying, please do something about this issue. So there's lots of ways that any one of us can make a difference here.
I hope that in year X, we never have to have a conversation like this.
I think we'll get there. I really do.
Well, I think with what you're doing, we will get there for sure.
Yeah, we're getting close.
So how big is your nonprofit?
What do you mean by revenue or staffing?
How many people?
Yeah. So we have about 250 staff, which is a reasonable size. Our budget's about $100 million a year, which feels like a lot of money. Again, to a guy who started with a $2,000 cash advance, and that took several years to pay back. So it was slow going at first, but it's turned into a pretty reasonable size. We're in all 50 states, and we talked about Ethiopia at the beginning of the conversation, but 99% of our work is here in the U.S., where there's pretty significant need. And then we have tens of thousands of volunteers, thousands and thousands of chefs and restaurateurs are involved. Some of them are involved in not only helping us raise money, but in nutrition education and teaching low-income families grocery shopping skills, food budgeting skills, how to read a nutrition label, pick out the healthiest food for your family. A lot of volunteers who help us raise money. So it's turned into a pretty sizable network.
So I remember you offered very kindly, you let me participate in a wine tasting with Sean Cassidy.
Yes, that was fun.
My teen heartthrob, poster on the wall. And he shared a story about how he sort of came to you and he didn't realize that there was a problem or, he thought, especially in his neighborhood, I guess. And he talked a little bit about one of his son's friends that showed up for dinner or kept eating, and he said, "What's up with this kid?"
Yeah.
And that was an amazing way for him to start participating. So, do you have a lot of people like that will come right to you and say, "What can I do?"
Yeah, we do. And in Sean's case, this was interesting because another friend and supporter of Share Our Strengths at our dinners, and we do lots of food and wine events. A man named Fred Steck had bid on one of the prizes was to get 5 of the best chefs in California to come cook at your house. And Fred's house happens to be this massive ranch in Santa Ynez, California, near Santa Barbara. And he invited Rosemary and I, the night he redeemed his package, he invited Ro and I to come have dinner with him. And his guests that night were David Crosby, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, right? And his wife, who was lovely, and a wonderful poet whose name escapes me for a minute, but you would name him. I think it was Dan Stern. And then also Sean Cassidy and his wife. And you and Ro probably both knew Sean Cassidy better than I did, because I was sitting from next to him, not knowing much about him at all. But he was incredibly interested and curious and really concerned about the issue. I had a couple minutes during the dinner to talk about it and share what we do. And he just said, how can I help? What can I do? How do I get involved? And he's been amazing.
That's great. So every bottle of wine that he sells, is it $2?
Yeah, I think $2 from his wine. My First Crush comes to Share Our Strength. I've also donated generously. He's introduced us to others. He's really been quite a champion.
Wow. I usually will finish off our talk with some rapid questions. But I think before I do that, I want to ask you if you could sit down with, say, 3 people, like you just talked about at a dinner. What would those people? Who would those people be? What would you say to them? And what would you have for dinner?
What do I have for dinner? 3 people. That's a really good question. Ro and Nate, can they be 2 of them?
Sure.
That's who I'd most like to have dinner with. I'm thinking of Wendell Berry, the author, who I recently did get to sit down with, and I mention him because we say a little grace or blessing at our dinner table every night, and it's a passage from one of his poems, and it's very short. It just says, "And we pray not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in heart and an eye clear. What we need is here." So we say that every night, and I always think of Wendell Berry. And I was getting ready to write him a letter today, and Rose said, "Why are you thinking of him?" And I said, "Well, because we quote him every single night." So he would probably be one. I think I think about some of the political figures who are no longer around, but who managed to get past kind of the partisanship.
Right.
One who is around, and I think I mentioned him when we talked last time, is Senator George Mitchell, who I thought was such a wise man and such a great representative for Maine. And then there are Republican senators of the past that when I worked in the Senate, Senator Jake Javits, Senator Bill Cohen, also, who's splits his time between Maine and D.C. I'd love to talk with them about what it was like at a time where you could, even though there was strong political feelings, you could still talk and come together about what was best for the country.
And I think what your organization is doing has done what it's doing, and the future of it. I would hope some of those conversations would take place with a few of these people, and they.
Yeah, because hunger really it's not a political issue at all.
It is not.
No.
It is absolutely not, and it's in this country. It shouldn't be a topic.
Yeah.
But okay, so I'm going to move on a little bit to favorite movie.
Oh gosh, it's between Shawshank Redemption, and To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, good. Yes.
The movies I like, my son finds very slow. Kids are used to movies today that really move, and I still like the old ones.
These rapid fire questions, I think I learn a lot from people
I'll bet.
You favorite book? You might not have a favorite book. What's your favorite book right now?
Yeah. Well, we're talking about Wendell Berry. Ro and I love one of his books called Jayber Crow, which is a really great book. I've got a lot of favorite books. I've got a favorite book by old New York Times columnist named Tom Wicker called Facing the Lions, which is a great political novel.
Yeah.
I read a lot of history.
Yeah.
I'm actually reading right now. I don't know if you remember Cornelius Ryan, who wrote The Longest Day about D-Day. And he wrote another book called A Bridge Too Far. And I started reading the introduction, which is written by a contemporary journalist named Rick Atkinson. And one of the things he unearthed that Cornelius Ryan said in terms of when he was asked, how is your writing, so historically accurate, but also so popular? How do you make it so accessible? And he said, I start everything I write with 2 words, Dear Mother.
Oh,
which I thought was like great writing advice.
That is great writing advice. So you've written a few books. I didn't even ask you that.
Yeah.
How did that go? How with the process of that? Was it fun to do that?
It was fun. I like writing quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I wrote one book that was just kind of a summation of some of the lessons I learned from politics and so forth, called Revolution of the Heart. And then I wrote a book that really about our work at Share Our Strength, but about a lot of nonprofit work called The Cathedral Within, which uses cathedral building as a metaphor for, you remember the great cathedral took hundreds of years to build, sometimes 500 years. So cathedral building as a metaphor for how do you work on something your whole life, even if you're not going to see it finished. And in those days, it didn't detract from people's craftsmanship or dedication, and actually enhanced it. Then I wrote a couple other books after that, but I'd say The Cathedral Within tends to be the popular favorite.
Yeah. So are you writing anything these days for coming out?
Well, when
you asked me this, so I have to ask you this.
Yeah, well, yours is in a drawer. We got to get it out of the drawer. I'm excited about yours. I've been thinking about that story down by the river that you told. It's really a good story. When I write, I don't write Dear Mother, but I do tend to write like a lot of letters, some of them to Rosemary, some of them to people that I work with. And then I kind of save the scripts and scraps and start to think about, what mortar needs to go between the bricks to hold them together. So I write a little bit every day, but
for you.
it doesn't have, the next book doesn't have a coherent shape yet.
Well, it's, I think I think everybody should try that exercise. And there's a lot that you can, when I was thinking about writing assignments, we have a writing club here, and we do a prompt. We give everybody a prompt, and 2 weeks later they show up with 500 words or less. And it is amazing that, just every day having that, it's sort of like exercising, and you get better at it, and your mind starts to really expand on what's out there. So
cheaper than therapy, right? I mean, for me, it's like great therapy, but much cheaper.
It is. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can, I think, get off your mind too when you're, as you say, that therapy. It's very helpful, and I think, where for me, it's like I'm afraid to share my writing because I don't think it's good. But it's not about that. It's just like how you're feeling, and even if no one sees it, but but I think it's a good daily exercise to do.
Maybe we'll have to have a plan to like pull open our drawers at the same time and take our manuscripts out.
Maybe.
We'll see.
So we talked about, the last time we sat down, we talked about libraries, and I think we really need to make a date to go to the Athenaeum.
Yes.
So if you were up for that,
I am so up for that, and I know Mike
our
Kelly
producer
is. Yes.
Mike Kelly would be up for that. So
it's a really special place.
Yeah. So do you and Rosemary and Nate go there often, or?
I used to go there quite a bit. I was using it as kind of almost like my office away from Washington. It's where I would go and work.
Yeah.
They don't make it super easy because there's all these old-fashioned rules about you can't take a briefcase in, and things like that. But it's quiet. They've got great resources. It's kind of an inspirational place to sit and write. Yeah. So during the pandemic, not as much, but we'll probably start going back soon. But yes, anytime you want to do it, you, me, Mike, and Rosemary, we got to do it.
That would be really nice.
Yeah.
When I was at Simmons College, when I was at library school, we had passes to go to the MFA and to the Garden Museum.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I found myself, because I would drop from here. I would take an afternoon or an evening class, so I'd work part of the day, get in my car, an hour and a half once a week for 2.5 years. And I got to listen to a lot of audiobooks, which was great. But when I would get down there, I would find myself wandering over to the Garden Museum to just sit for 10, 15, 20 minutes and just collect myself. And it was that kind of a place that it was just so inviting, and sometimes I get in trouble because I get a little too close to a painting, or parts of the tile and miss, but those kinds of places are really special. So I hope we get there one day.
Yeah, we have to. We have to.
Thank you so much.
If we go with Mike, they'll give us the royal treatment.
Yes. So okay, Mike, you're on. Thank you so much for sitting down with us again.
Yeah,
and taking the time, because I know you're a very busy person. But
any reason to come to Grace Memorial Library, and I'll be here.
And please do not stop doing what you're doing. It is so important, and it is so special, and we so appreciate everything that you do for kids across America. So anyway,
good.
And thanks for being part of our Graves family.
Yeah, we love Graves.
And it's been such a joy for me to watch your son grow up and visit with us. And, that's what makes this place great, is people like you who continue to do that.
Well, I hope it comes full circle. And if he ends up in college in Maine, which is what he hopes to do, during his breaks, he can come and do his studying here.
Yes. And he can always come to my house for dinner.
Okay.
So just so he knows that. He likes cats, maybe? No?
Oh, yeah. He likes all animals.
Great.
All animals.
Winner.
For sure, yeah.
Hockey? Is he a hockey fan?
Yeah, he's a hockey player.
Okay,
Played hockey to school. Yeah,
there we go.
Absolutely. Okay, so he'll fit right in.
Super.
Okay. Good.
Thank you so much for being here.
Great to see you.
And thanks so much for tuning in tonight, and we hope to see you next time on What's Your Story?